Welcome to the Promised Land. The Promised Land being, weird Night Rose lists and Sharot turning out to be the most dominant deck in the meta. Welcome folks, we're doing a meta analysis once again. It's been a little while. We have V-BT09 coming up in English in just a couple weeks actually, very soon. But before we get to that, we're going to be taking a look at V-BT09. It's already a month forward. We're going to take a look at how the meta is shaping up so we know what to expect. And if you guys are on the fence about building certain decks, you can kind of jump ahead of time and look at what is good in Japan. So we have three different sources today, or well, two sources, but one of them gives us two pie charts. So one of them will be Dexander, and then the other two will be from Double Crit. So we're going to take a look at this, talk about the pie charts. We're going to skip over a bunch of stuff that we've already spoken about, and then just kind of like talk about mostly the new additions, but also some of the different points that I have about certain decks, and maybe we'll talk briefly about some of the stuff that's been remaining in the meta as well. So, as always, big thank you to Mr. Dexander. Give him a follow on Twitter. He makes these pie charts that we look at, and to check out his blog where you find all this information on, also the deck list for all these decks that we talk about. So, really great source, honestly, amazing job done by the man himself. But without any further ado, let's take a look at that the pie chart. So the pie chart, let me bring my mic a bit closer. Ta-dam! So here you see that we have quite a few things in here actually. So it's a pretty big one. He started separating the decks by the kind of like archetypes. So you can see here, Dark Irregular Sharot taking up 22%. By far the biggest, almost like double the size of the next deck, which is Night Rose. So pretty big addition here. I thought Sharot was pretty good, but I didn't think he was that insane until Number of Terror comes in and turns out that you can just like loop its effect because you keep restanding it with Sharot and your hand just becomes mega fat and therefore you're able to sustain really well. So Dark Regulars in here is going to be the most dominant deck on every single pie chart that we look at. Of course, a lot of this information is drawn from the same locals. I should mention that again. Also WGP qualifiers, so it's a bit more competitive there as well. But it's very interesting to see. So Sharot has basically everything. He has pretty consistent countercharging, has consistent soul charging, has consistent retire options, has multi-attacks, has protect, has card draw. There's nothing much else you could ask for. Number of Terror even works as extra shield if you needed to. So it's like the deck really does have just about everything. And so I guess I didn't at first realize how good it was, and I think it was just me sleeping on Number of Terror at first. But this, it went from being like, okay, it seems pretty good on theory to just being like insane in actual play. So Sharot really showed up, and I think it's like Sharot itself is a very big component of why that is happening, but Number of Terror definitely feels like it's carrying a big chunk of that, together with the other supporting pieces too. You can find some nice deck lists, of course, on the websites. I know that G-Station also has covered the deck on a deck profile on his channel, so you can check that out as well. So he kind of covers the really good points about this deck. Also, being able to tutor out your grade 3s really easily is a very big part of that deck being good too. Now, moving down the list, we have Night Rose as the second one. Now, Night Rose, I'm going to make a criticism here that a lot of these decks are missing a certain card that, when played in Night Rose, makes the deck insanely better because of how many options that opens up, which is Skeleton Navigator. So Navigator is a simple card that just says, as an act, you rest 2 rear guards, including him if you want to, and mill the top 5 cards of your deck. So at first, it took me a while for people to convince me that this card was good, but then, playing regular Night Rose with, for example, the Tommies, or just like the regular Night Rose list you keep seeing on Twitter, I was like, yeah, I mean, you have your options in your drop zone, but you have to work pretty hard to get them in there to actually do stuff properly. But then Navigator just opens up the seas, and it literally just goes like, okay, let me just drop a bunch of your pieces, because most of your deck is pieces you want to call anyway. Even if it's triggers, if you're playing lazy, you can call your triggers out. But the nice thing is that you can basically just like drop your Navigators, rest 2 cards, mill 5. And then the thing is, this isn't a once per turn ability, so if you call 2 more rears, through whatever means, in the same turn, you can use Navigator skill again to rest those other 2 rears, and voila, mill another 5. And therefore you got your drop zone set up, you can go Night Rose and just start slamming left and right. So a lot of Japanese lists don't play this card. And a funny story that I don't know if I should. I mean, I'll like basically. I have a good friend that is part of my Discord. He goes by Desi. You can follow him on Twitter too. I'll put a little, here. Follow him. He's kind of spreading the word of Navigator in Japan. So he works and lives in Japan. And basically, he's quite a competitive player. We met when I was studying in Japan as well, when I went down to Osaka for the big Vanguard festival. And so, basically, he is the only person basically playing Navigator. And then every time he wins with it, Japanese players just go like, wow, that's actually a good card. Because they've just been sleeping on it, just like a lot of other people have. They're just sleeping on Navigator. So he's kind of like spreading the word of Navigator through Japan and just like taking names with it. So Night Rose herself, of course, is an amazing card. I've been preaching about this a lot. We playtested her on stream before the Lazy reveal. So it was without Navigator, because back then I think Navigator wasn't revealed yet either, maybe. But so Navigator really adds a lot to it. But Night Rose herself is an amazing deck. Like, you get big power columns, you get all the superior calling, you've got multi-attacking, thanks to, both Night Rose, but Night Rose in conjunction with, whether it's the Grade 2 Night Mist, or it's the Columbard, you get to do that. There is a potential to high roll 4 Skull Dragon attacks, so you go basically Skull Dragon, and then you go Night Rose. Night Rose calls you a Skull Dragon in the front row, and then it calls you a Columbard in the back, and then the Columbard calls out another Skull Dragon. So then you can go, Night Rose finishes her attack, and then Skull Dragon. So that's, of course, a very big and powerful play. It is quite high rolly, but you only need 2 Skull Dragons, which, if you're running Navigator, and, you also have the selective milling from Columbard himself, is actually pretty easy to achieve, and it doesn't, like, cost an insane amount of counterblast or anything like that. So it's pretty cool. It's definitely very strong. Of course, you need to use Bone to call those Skull Dragons in the first place. So Negro Bone is a immensely amazing card. Bone, literally, in my opinion, is one of the big carries. I think it's one of the best cards printed, period, together with the Columbard. So, like, Grand Blue just casually got some of the best cards ever made, like, literally in the history of Vanguard. And these cards are very hard to replace, I would say. So the new Bone, Columbard. Lazy is an interesting card. You see it here and there sometimes, but overall this deck is just really good. I personally really like Night Rose. I'm very excited to play her myself. I've always wanted to in G, and now the deck seems to, like, it's still a standard deck, but it feels like they've tried to replicate what she used to do in G with that kind of, the multi-attacks and a lot of these like setups, maybe kind of lacking a little bit of the complexity that she had in G. Maybe not maybe, I think she does lack the complexity she had in G, because you could really set up for the opponent's turn. But luckily we have Premium for that, so you can still play the more complex Night Rose plays in Premium, which is very nice. Alright, so then we start seeing familiar faces. Kagero with the cross at 8% in 3rd, so that one is expected as a very popular deck, and of course, we've seen the 16 crit variant pop up now, so people just literally dropped heals playing 16 crit and just going ham with it, and yeah, it's proving to be pretty good. Then we have Pale Moon with Harry. So Harry is a pretty nice deck, simply because it's now quite consistent. You have 2 different searchers for your Magia Dolls. On top of that, the Magia Dolls in themselves do very nice things. And Harry on his own is just superior calls, and then you have the Lark Pigeon that pairs up with the Dragon, and just, you're basically abusing, whether it's Axel 1 or Axel 2, to swing for massive numbers with like guard restricts and everything. So it's really nice. It's a strong deck. So if you're planning to build Harry, it's definitely a smart decision, and the deck doesn't look too expensive either. Then we have Yasuya. This one was surprising. Yasuya has been really popping up a lot. So many people actually talked trash about this deck when it was first revealed, but then we even had like WCC Kai, one of my co-commentators, he was saying on Twitter, like, the more I play Yasuya, the more strong it feels. And he was like, compared to Harry, it's like the opposite. So Yasuya really has it has so much tutoring for rear guards. It has a restander. It has, to a certain extent, Axel spam, and it just feels like it has quite a lot going for it. It's this like strong, fairly aggressive deck. Sure that power columns aren't as huge as they could be, like back in Hyuga days, but you're not really trying to go for those Hyuga days. Plus you still have your 1 of Shirayuki that you can recycle, so that's also really strong. Like, keep in mind that even though Shirayuki's at 1, you can still use her and bring her back later on. So it's like, you can still use that Shirayuki engine to a big extent. So Yasuya, I can definitely see, like, I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised with how well Yasuya has been doing. It's honestly very cool to see that the deck can actually perform, the deck can actually dominate to a certain extent. It's been winning a lot of the events that it's been showing up at, so I'm pretty happy. Yasuya, you're doing good. Good job, man. You're really picking up the slack from G. Then we have a lot of other decks that we've seen already. So we have Messiahs. They're still kicking. Messiahs are a very strong deck. I'm not surprised. You know, a lot of people were saying, oh, like, you know, Messiah was super strong, but now the next sets are out-creeping it. I don't really think so. I think it's just also the factor that a lot of these new decks are just more popular. I think Messiahs are still very, very potent, even if they're a little bit slower than a lot of these other decks, but they're still very strong. They're just quite piece reliant, but that was obvious from the start. Then, of course, we have MLB, very popular and pretty strong. Not as strong as the other decks, but still very good. And of course, with the MLB set coming out in English very soon, also going to be a great pickup. Then we have some of the Bang Dream decks. We have Hello Happy World, who's seen as the best Bang Dream deck. Next stage coming up here as well. Dueling Dragons is kind of interesting, new addition here. Not going to spend too much time talking about it. I mean, it's just Dueling Dragons, you know, doing what they do best of just ride locking. I think it's the element of surprise that gets a lot of people too, so that's of course something to keep in mind. And then of course we have Susano still doing good, Blademaster still doing good, Asha still doing good. Look here, got herself a top. I'm not sure at what scale of event, but I mean the deck is a 2019 deck, made it a little bit faster, but not fast enough to compare with the 2020 level of power. So that's kind of the problem. Like, she's great. I love Lukier, you know, and it's a fun deck to play, but when you look at, you know, every other deck we've looked at, what they do, it feels like it doesn't really do enough, per se. So, I mean, like, you have all these attacks, and you have all this power, and, like, Axel, Circle Generation, and, you know, all that stuff, but without Dorian, it also lost that ability to dig into your fronts at the bottom of the deck to actually, like, get that perfect double front win con. So, bit unfortunate, but I mean, it is what it is. And then the last few decks, we have Reza Suilan from Bang Dream, Chronofang, Blad Black, still kicking. Melody, I think, is actually not to be underestimated. Can still definitely just steal wins. And then 10% of others. So that's Dexander's pie chart. Now let's take a quick look at the two from Double Crits. So first one we have here is from the 14th to the 20th of August. So this was the previous week, I believe. Oh no, first let's look at, first we're going to look at the one from the 7th to the 13th. So that was the previous week. So here we see 31% Charrot. So that's actually very dominant, 22 decks of Charrot. Then we've got 13% Night Rose, 8% Yasuya, so 5 decks of Yasuya. So here it's actually dominating more than Harry, more than MLB, more than Messiahs. Like Kagero, forget it, you know. So Yasuya really showed up that week. That's where a lot of these results are coming from. So then we see some of the other decks that we've been seeing already, you know, Messiahs, got 3 decks in there, you know, MLB, Hello Happy World, again, Luke here, showing up with two lists, and then, you know, pretty good. Then, let's look at the other one. So this one was from this week. So here we see Charrot, you know, in the last one, it was pretty big. It was 31%. Here it goes down to 15, and it's a pretty big shakeup, looking a lot more like the list that we looked at from Dexander, where, you know, we have like 15% Charrot, so it's first, but not by a huge mile. Then Night Rose, you know, showing up. I don't know if the deck lists have been evolving yet, if they're picking up on the Navigator, but we'll see. We'll see. If the West has to take the wheel, we'll take the wheel. We will navigate Grand Blue if necessary. And then we have Overlord here, again, same amount of tops as Night Rose, so 16 crit Overlord, I'm telling you, it's coming in there. Then Yasuya with 11%, 7 tops, so there's a lot of tops for Yasuya. This is combined over the 2 weeks. This is a total of 6 and 7, so 13 tops for Yasuya over 2 weeks. That's very good. Messiahs, OTT, so Susano, you know, decks that we are pretty happy seeing at the top here. And then Hello Happy World and Dimension Police, again, still showing up pretty well, so definitely nice to see that as well. So yeah, that's basically it for this meta. We are going into the V-BT09 meta next week, so that's going to be Luard and Final Blaster Overlord, Gaia, Rising, and Ghidorah. So it's going to be interesting to see how much that will actually shake things up. I'm not sure myself, honestly. I'm very curious to see how the things will change, and whether, you know, quite a few of these decks are, like, while some of the decks are field reliant, so Ghidorah can take advantage of them, you know, Night Rose literally sits on an empty field. And like Sharad also empties its own field by just soul charging its own pieces with Number of Terror pretty consistently. So it's like, I don't know to which extent, and like also Overlord can like fight solo. Yasuya might be the one that takes an L, honestly, as well as Messiah's, and Susano as well. I don't know, there's quite a few decks that definitely are going to take an L from Ghidorah, but then quite a few that won't. And then, I mean, even then, how big is that L, you know? It's gonna be interesting. I think it'll be an interesting meta coming in with V-BT10. A lot of people say that the power level of that set does not feel the same as the last two, but we'll see if that's true, you know? Just like with Yasuya, was like, a lot of people were not saying it was strong enough at first, but some decks just, you know, you put them in the right hands, they make the right lists, they make the right plays, and there you go. You've got yourself a very dominant deck. So we'll see how things change over time, but for now, this was the V-BT09 meta analysis. So we'll be back next month for V-BT10, taking a look at that ahead of time. And then, of course, there's a lot of good products coming out in that time frame for English Vanguard as well. So Messiah's, Overlord, you know, you keep seeing them here. Messiah's, Overlord, DP, OTT, they're all in here. Blade Master as well comes up here and there, but not as much. But in my opinion, it's still a very strong deck, so something to look forward to. And if you're picking up Blade Master, I definitely think it's a good pickup too. So yeah, on that note, that's gonna be it for me today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.